Greetings, class, and welcome to another session here in Second Language Acquisition Studies. My name is Dr. Frank Tuzzi. Today we're going to be talking about styles and strategies related to second language acquisition. Much of this information is coming out of Brown's textbook, Principles of Language Learning and Teaching. So you may want to take a look at this. This is Chapter 5 in his book. I'm going to be supplementing this with other materials as well, but I just wanted to let you know that's where a lot of this information is going to be coming from. We'll be looking at processes, strategies, styles, autonomy, strategies, communicative strategies, and then strategies-based instruction today. Let's begin right now with looking at a couple of preliminaries. Regardless of who is learning language, we all have in our brains a variety of universal constructs. One of them is the ability to process information. And so we should understand what they mean by process here. Okay, process, linguistically speaking, people have this ability to process information, to take this information and use it in such a way that we can learn from it. Okay, and that's the process that we're referring to. It's a universal capability that we all have, and we all have this ability linguistically as well. We can process the icons that we look at or the sounds that we hear in order to learn linguistically. Not only do we have this ability to process, but we have a certain style in which we do process information. So there are particular characteristics of learning, of understanding that we use or that we take advantage of, or this kind of like a trait that we have as far as the way that we learn. Some of us, for example, are more attentive to detail, while others are more attentive to the big picture type of thing. And so we all have this learning style for understanding and grappling with language information. And then on top of that, there are ways that we can learn. That's the last element here, this idea of strategies. There are specific methods or approaches to a problem or a task. Some are specific actions, some are behaviors or steps. They're tips and tricks and ways that people do things in order to accomplish their learning task. So we've got processes. That's that universal thing that goes on in that. We have a style, our own dance, as it were, for learning. And then there are strategies that we use, probably associated with that particular style. But there are strategies that we use to help us to learn language. And taking all this into account, we should understand that all of our students are going to have, all language learners are going to they have that process. They should know what that is. You as a teacher should know they have a particular style, and they have certain strategies that they know about. Now, probably a lot of strategies that they don't know about, and so your goal will, of course, be to try to introduce them to your students. Let's take a look at learning styles, the general characteristics of learning styles. You're basically looking at two different polar opposites. You've got your field independent and your field dependent. You've got your random versus sequential, global, particular, inductive, deductive. You've got your reflective style versus your impulsive style. Let me just run through these real quick here. Field independence, dependence has to do with how one processes information. Those that are field dependent are basically those that want to see the forest. They want to look at everything and try to understand everything as a whole. Field independent doesn't require the whole forest. They can just look at one tree and try to understand the components therein. So there are some people who will be able to pick out little details, okay, and then there are others that can understand everything because they're looking at the big picture. Languages can also be this way. There are some languages that are very, very specific, and just by looking at the specificness of the linguistic structure in a sentence, you can understand many things that are going on, because each element is required. Okay. Then there are those that are more dependent on the context of what's going on in order for it to be understood. And so they have they have fewer linguistic markers within a sentence. Okay, you have to have more of the context of what's going on in order to better understand it. Okay, that's the same idea here with field independence. It's very specific. They can look at little individual things, and field dependence, they require looking at everything. Random versus sequential, you don't have to understand things in a sequential order. You much prefer this popcorn style of looking at all these different things. You don't mind that it's random. You can enjoy that versus those that require it to be in a specific sequence. You've got your global and your particular, which sounds very similar to field dependence, independence. I can look at the big picture, right? Or I can look at the little details. Inductive, deductive, okay, which is what I would also call top-down or bottom-up. Inductive is where you begin with a main idea and you drill down into all the little details that are there, or deductive, where you have all the little parts and you build up to a main idea or a main concept. Lastly, you've got reflective style versus impulsive style. A reflective style are those who think about things before they act. They analyze. They're more abstract in trying to understand everything before they go ahead and go do something. Versus the impulsives, who they're more relying on their emotions or in any event, and they just go type of learning style. So you've got these two polar, and most people are somewhere in the middle. They may have one, they may be field dependent, but they're deductive. May be different types of things that are going on here. Everybody's is different. Let's take a look a little bit more at field dependence, independence, and some of the ideas here with left-right brained dominance. This is not necessarily etched in stone, but these are some of the generalities that you see here. Left brain dominance type of people are more intellectual. They try to analyze things. They remember details, the minutiae, versus those that are more right brain, they remember faces. They're more intuitive. Again, left brains are better at responding to verbal instructions. You provide them, the instructions, and they hear it or they read it and they can understand it. They're very systematic in that way. Right brain, they respond more to demonstrations, things that they can see, things that they can feel. And they are less systematic. You go look at their sock drawer, it's all over the place. Left brains tend to be more objective in their judgments, and so they're looking for plus and minus, yes and no type of things, and that's the way they tend to make judgments and decisions. Whereas the right brain are more subjective judgments, things that are less definable, but obviously there. Left brains are more planned, structured. They prefer certain things instead of the uncertain or the vague. They're very planned, they're very structured, which means they're not very spontaneous. Left brains, I guess, would be the ones that are considered less likely just to take off and go to the beach on a whim, right? Left brains are more analytic. They're analytic readers versus the right, they're more synthesized readers. They want to be able to look at the big picture very quickly. The left prefers talking versus the right, they prefer drawing. Left prefers multiple choice questions. Again, they want specific answers, yes, no, right, wrong, black, white. Whereas the right brain, they prefer more open-ended questions where they can describe more and provide a bigger picture. The left likes to control their feelings more, whereas the right brain, they're more free with their feelings. Left brains don't get body language. When I think of left brain, I think of The Big Bang Theory, and I think of Sheldon, who is very left-brained. All of these things are his, apparently. He doesn't get body language. He doesn't get metaphors. He likes the logical problem-solving. And then on the other side of this is, what's her name? Penny. She's more on the right side. She prefers the drawing. She prefers the open-ended. She's better with her feelings. She can read body language. She likes metaphors, right? She's more intuitive. She kind of just knows what it is type of thing. With regard to language learners, you're going to have both of these. You're going to have both types of students. I've had students in my class who I just kind of guessed. I kind of knew what it was. There's your intuitive learner. Versus someone who says, unless you tell me the exact sequence of events, I'm not going to be able to figure this out. Right? There's your left brain. People who won't answer unless they get it exactly right in their head first, they're going to be more left brain. Right? People who are going to take risks are probably going to be more right brain. And you can see the idea here between left and right dominance. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is always the case. This is a generality, but you can kind of see these tendencies as you go. You can make a stereotype, just make sure that you don't use it for the wrong reasons. So you have this left and right brain dominance, and it's you can see the learning styles as you look at them. The next element here with regard to learning style, ambiguity. I cannot stress the importance of living with ambiguity as a language learner. Little kids, they do it all the time. You say something to them and they don't understand it, more often than not, they're just going to ignore you. They're just going to ignore whatever because they don't understand, and it's beyond their capabilities to understand. They're just going to forget about it for now. Eventually, they'll come across it again, and hopefully they'll be able to understand it then. People who can't do that, who have to understand everything, are going to be very frustrated with language learning. You've got to learn to let go. You've got to learn to say, okay, I tried, I'll learn it later. I'll just forget about it for now. Just live with it. Going to Japan, and I would go into a meeting, or I would go into a church service, and that's all I heard was psh. That's all I heard was snow. So many things that I just didn't understand, and so I was like, just forget about it. You can't do it now, so you're not going to be able to do it now. Go play with the little kids who are also not paying attention because they don't get it. You got to learn to live with that ambiguity. We already talked about reflexivity and impulsivity. Probably better to have a happy medium, but you need to think about things, try to understand what's going on versus just do it type of thing. You also have learners that are visual learners, and they learn by watching. They learn by seeing other people. Others who are learned by hearing. Say it again so that you can hear it again, they can understand. And you've got learners who do it because they can actually do something. It's more physical. Okay? They're kinesthetic learners. Everybody is different. It also tells you that if you're going to be teaching, you want to use as many of these different styles as possible so you can grab more students, right? Learning styles. Some other elements that are involved in language learning. One of the most important that I would think is learner autonomy. You as a language learner want to be able to learn all by yourself. Obviously, you can't do that initially. You need people to help you. But the more strategies you learn, the better you'll be able to teach yourself. The better you'll be able to not need a teacher to give you guidance. And so you as a teacher, if you are a teacher, your goal is to encourage your students to become autonomous learners. Your goal is to not have a job. Your goal is so that they don't need you, so that they can do this by themselves. Encourage students to be self-starters, independent learners, and taking responsibility for their language learning. Can't stress this enough, especially in the world of vocabulary development. If the students are not pushing themselves, they're never going to get beyond intermediate level of language learning. They have to have that desire and want to learn to do this all by themselves. Now, it is true that there are some cultures that do not encourage learner autonomy, and that's true. They're not encouraged to do that. You, as a language teacher, however, want to try to push that on people in ways that are going to be socially acceptable, culturally acceptable. But if you can do things, and then the thing here is that you need to train your students that it's okay in your class to become independent. It's okay in your class to take those risks, because in some cultures it's not the way that they're typically learned. So you're going to be teaching a new culture. Part of the American culture as well is taking chances. So you're not out of bounds by saying you're going to be teaching them this. It's to their advantage if they could learn to do this, simply because it's going to help them learn language faster as well, because they're going to take that responsibility for learning language by themselves. So that's learner autonomy, and it's definitely a plus if you're going to be a language learner. The other thing would be awareness, and this requires metacognition, thinking about how you learn. It's recognizing your learning styles, recognizing the strategies that you learn, learning about how you learn. And you, again, as a language learner, it's very important for you to think about how do you learn. And I would love to ask you guys this right now. How do you learn? Are you more of oh, they were not here. Yeah. Where is this? Oh, these here, right? Whoops, no, not here. Here. Are you more of one who uses these types of skills or abilities? Are you more left-brained or right-brained? Do you plan things? Are you more systematic? Are you more intuitive? What are the skills? What do you do when you learn? So you, as a language learner, you should be thinking about that. How do I learn? Think about what strategies do I use to learn, so that you can, again, identify your strengths and your weaknesses so that you can become a better language learner. So big part of this idea of learning styles is you got to know what yours are. It means you need to think about how you learn. Okay? And then, of course, the last element here that Brown brings up is action. After I learn what my learning strategies, my learning styles are, I need to start using them. I need to start using my strengths, and I need to start strengthening my weaknesses so that I can become an even better language learner. Knowledge without performance is worthless. So you know your strategies, but you know your learning styles, but you don't use them. What good is it? You need to encourage your students to start taking advantage of the knowledge they have about their learning styles. All right, learning strategies. There are a whole bunch of them. There's been research done. People have talked to good language learners and said, how do you study? How do you learn? And I encourage you to go do this. Go find somebody who's bilingual or trilingual and ask them, how did you learn language? What tricks did you do to learn language? Ask them how they became bilingual or trilingual. There's some list that we've pulled out, much of this from, again, from Brown. Good language learners, they find their own way. They take charge of their learning. In other words, they're responsible. They're those independent learners that we talked about before. They organize information about language. Okay? Again, they're taking responsibility for their own language learning. They're creative learners who have a feel for learning. They have this knack. Again, we're looking now at the intuitive side, right? They have a knack for learning, and they kind of figure their way. They try to figure out how things are going, right? They're creative. They find ways to make it work. I'm reminded of a gentleman by the name, I think his name was Frederick, who was a slave and in the 1800s, and he taught himself to read, and he did it by convincing the white kids his age to teach him things. He did it by tricking them into giving him information. I just think that was an amazing story, how he was creative. He was creative. He would say, I would know the alphabet, you know, ha ha, I know it and you don't. And he would spew out the alphabet, and he'd be making mistakes. And they would laugh at him and say, no, you bubblehead, it's not this, it's this way. And they would correct him. Of course, he's happy. That's what he wanted. He wanted to learn. He's very creative about how you learn language. Make opportunities to practice. As a language learner for me as well, I would make a chance, create an opportunity to go learn and practice. I would get on the train and I would deliberately talk to people if I was on the train or on the bus, or I would deliberately not know how to get somewhere so that I'd be forced to go ask somebody for directions. It was an opportunity to go practice. Living with ambiguity, already talked about it, right? We need to be able to do that. I don't get it, I don't get it. No big deal. Use mnemonics, like we all used mnemonics to know what the colors of the rainbow are, or what the spaces in the cleft are in music, in a sheet of music, right? Or you use that. Do the same thing with the learning language. You use mnemonics. Use the L1. Use your first language if you need to help you understand. It's definitely a great way to do this. Obviously, you want to stay within the second language. But why not use it, right? Make your errors work. So when you make mistakes, make sure that you learn from them so that you can not do those mistakes again. It's kind of difficult sometimes if people aren't telling you the mistakes that you are making. You need to keep an eye on the clues that are going on so that you can see when they are. But if you're making mistakes, make sure that you're not making them again. Take advantage of those mistakes and learn from them. Use the context cues to gain comprehension. When you're doing reading or you're trying to figure out something that you're looking at out in the culture, right? Try to look for the clues, the cues that are there to try to help you understand what's going on. Make intelligent guesses. That means you need to know some information and infer from that information what you believe the right course of action or the right meaning will be, right? Try to keep the conversation going. If you don't understand something, don't stop and look up in a dictionary something. Try to keep that conversation going, that maybe that person who's with you can give you this information. Don't let it stop. Part of the problem of people who are using dictionaries all the time is they stop the conversation and the momentum disappears. If at all possible, keep that conversation going. Try to find some way, try to find some strategy to keep that conversation going so that you can learn, right? Learn different registers. Learn how to speak to people who are below you or your peers or people above you. Learn how to speak to a boss or to somebody who's a subordinate to you in the business or in school. If you're learning those different registers, you have a wider access to people, and of course, you're going to be able to learn more. Brown lists 3 major categories: metacognitive, cognitive, and socioaffective strategies. We'll take a quick look at those over here. Metacognitive strategies that he talks about. One is advanced organizers. I got a misspelling here. Ways for you to predict what's going to be coming ahead of time as you're trying to organize into groups so that you can be prepared for the information that's coming. You have directed attention, where you're focusing on the information that's coming, and the other things that are not related to your learning you try to get rid of, you try to not focus on. Selective attention is where you're actually focusing not just on the information that you're trying to learn, but also certain segments of it so that you can get your main ideas, and you're trying to look for that specific information, whether you're reading it or you're listening to it, right? You've got self-management. You deliberately put yourself in places where you can learn. You don't study in front of the TV while you're listening to music and talking on the phone with somebody. You manage your time so that you learn in a place, in an environment that's conducive to learning, right? You do functional planning. And that's where you try to anticipate the functions that you need, for like asking directions, or for, collecting information, greeting someone, whatever that function is. You try to plan ahead and try to learn a couple of those phrases that you may need so that you can be successful when you're doing that. Self-monitoring. As you're speaking and hearing you're monitoring what's going on so that you can try to analyze what you're saying versus what other people are saying, trying to find the congruities and whatnot. Delayed production. You deliberately wait to respond or to write so that you can see what other people are doing. You take advantage of the other information that's out there, people who are talking, people who are writing, and you try to collect that so that you can try to get a better response, right? It's a delayed response. Self-evaluation. After you write something or after you say something, you then analyze it. How was this process? Was it good? How can I improve that process? Those are all metacognitive processes. Your cognitive processes, repetition, okay? And interestingly enough, spaced repetition is a good way to continue the language learning. Resourcing. Are you taking the available resources within the culture, within the situation that you're in to help you learn language? You're reading a text and you've got posters or captions or graphs. Are you taking advantage of those resources? Does it have an extra materials in the back, for example? Translation. Will translation help you learn? You're going to use that as help. Grouping. You've got a variety of bits of information and you try to categorize them to help you understand and process that information. Note-taking. If you can do deduction, you've got all these little parts and you're trying to find out what the main idea is. Recombination, where you've got all these different pieces and you're trying to put them together in different ways so that you can learn new information. Imagery, trying to picture in your mind what this person is saying or what this text is trying to say so that you can understand what's going on. Auditory representation, where you've got a series of ideas and you want to try to remember it by hooking it to a sound, hooking it to a phrase so that it'll help you understand and remember it. Keyword memorization, where again you have a key word and that's the key to understanding everything else below it. Okay, so you create a doorway or an access. Okay, contextualization. You've got words and ideas and you don't really know what they mean, so you put them in context. I remember a word that I learned in Japanese, which was the word to bear the load type of thing. And I understood what it meant, but I never heard it in context. I had memorized it, right, through repetition, but I wasn't able to use it in a sentence because I'd never heard it in context. And I'm in a meeting one day and I hear somebody use that word and bing, I was like immediately, great. Now I have context for this word, now I can use it, right? Transferring again from what you know to something that you don't know, right? And then inferencing, trying to figure out what's going on. You see all these pieces, and then you try to infer into it what some new information or what they're trying to say. Socioaffective skills. You've got cooperation, working with other people, maybe asking questions, and so those are socioaffective strategies. And so there are a lot of strategies here. There's like almost 20 that I can list here, right? Metacognitive, cognitive, and socioaffective. Those we want to know. There's those three major categories and a bunch of the elements in them. There's also communication strategies, and he's listed two here. Avoidance strategies and then compensatory strategies. I'll take a quick look at this list here. The avoidance strategies, message abandonment. You're trying to work on something, but you're trying to convey a message, but it can't be done. Okay, well, ambiguity fits in. You say, okay, I give up. I'm not going to worry about it now. I'm not going to get frustrated. Topic avoidance. Here's a topic that I know I don't know a lot of vocabulary for, and so I'm going to avoid it. I remember I was talking with one gentleman in a meeting that we had, and I found out that he's an astrophysicist. I love astronomy, so I wanted to talk to him about it, but I didn't know any of the astronomy words in Japanese. So there's a topic that I want to try to avoid that. Same thing with medicine. I go to the doctor, and I don't know any medical terms. Fortunately for me, I do have some doctors who have these little books that on one page are the English words, on the other page are the Japanese words, and so he'll look up that word and then he'll show it to me, and I can know what it is. But it's a topic I'll try to avoid because I don't know the vocabulary for it. Compensatory strategies. These are great strategies. I love circumlocution. Circumlocution, the ability to go around a word that you don't know. So, for example, I want to talk to you about, I've got this animal in my yard, and I don't know what it is. I want to get rid of it. What kind of animal? Well, he's got 4 legs, and he's got these kind of long ears, and he hops around. He doesn't run. It's the most interesting thing. Right? Oh, it's a rabbit. Yeah, that's right. It's a rabbit. What I did was circumlocution. I talked around a word to try to describe it. And when I go places, when I'm in Japan and I don't know a word, I immediately go to circumlocution. I gave the example before about me going to the bank and I wanted to open up an account. And I walk in, I don't know what the word account is. So I talk around it. I want to put money in the bank. Oh, you want an account? They say to me. Yes, I want an account. I learned that word. Okay, they taught it to me. Excellent thing to do. Approximation. You kind of like what I do with that circumlocution. I kind of give you a description, but it's not detailed. It's kind of kind of vague, kind of there, and so hopefully you'll be able to understand the rest. An all-purpose word. We hear those a lot when we're talking to the people. Gotcha. Okay. And these are catchphrase words, which is later on too. Start using stock phrases. That you can use in order to help you communicate. So maybe you're using these all-purpose words or these stock phrases. You may make up a word. You don't know what it is, and so you make it up, right? So I had a friend from Germany who was trying to tell me that it was snowing, and didn't know how to put that together, and so the word was snowing. So I made up the word. Okay, well, they conveyed the idea, even though it wasn't the right form. They made up a word, right? Maybe you use non-linguistic elements. Maybe you use gestures or hand motions or facial expressions in order to try to explain something. Great way to communicate. And again, if you can find a way to communicate and then they give you the word, you've just learned a new word, right? So these are great strategies. You're compensating for what you don't know, right? You can try a translation. You can try code switching. Some English or some, whatever the other language is, and some English. You're switching back and forth. You can ask for help if you know somebody who's bilingual. And then, of course, you can do the ever-famous ahs and ums, stalling, trying to prevent yourself from saying I don't know by doing the ums and ahs. Every language, ums and ahs are different. In English, we would use In Japanese, it would be eto ne. Okay, they're different. And it's vocabulary, actually. But you can use stalling as a sort of a compensation for words that you don't know or ideas that you don't understand. Okay? Those are avoidance strategies and then compensatory strategies. We have a lot of strategies. There's at least 25 different strategies that I have there. Which ones do you use? Which ones are beneficial to you? Which ones do you not use, but you think, that might be helpful. I should learn how to do that. Take advantage of that strategy, right? This all goes into this last idea here about strategies-based instruction. How do teachers include strategy training in their language learning classes? And if you're going to be a teacher, I cannot recommend more that you give your students strategies. Again, you want them to be autonomous learners. You want them to not need you, so you want to teach them these strategies so they can learn language. They can take control over their language learning. They can be responsible. Now, I can't learn them all. I can't teach them all, obviously, if I don't know what they are. So I need to know what they are before I can teach them. And your students can't learn them until they understand what strategies are and they understand what their own strategies are that they use, until they understand their learning style. So part of the process is they have to figure out what they know. And then you as a teacher need to start introducing these strategies. You're teaching a lesson, and then you introduce this particular strategy that goes well with it until you can teach them that strategy. You may want to have them do a strategy inventory. Do some metacognitive activities to help them think about how do you learn, just like we looked at before when we were talking about what are the characteristics of a good language learner. I said, well, ask yourself, how do you learn? You might want to ask your students, how do they learn? So you might want to do some sort of an inventory. You need to provide them opportunities to practice with these strategies. In other words, you actually create activities where they have to use that strategy. I've done a lot with vocabulary, like that circumlocution, where maybe I give them the word on flashcards and they have to describe, they have to talk around it so that other people can guess what that word is. Okay? You want to fill in, imbue these activities throughout the year with specific planned activities. I would agree. Try to set them up. At the same time, if you run into a teachable moment, grab it as a way to teach a new strategy to someone. Always ways that you can do that. You plan things, but then don't also underestimate the opportunities that arise simply because of the situation that that you're in. Those are strategies-based instruction. And again, I would recommend that throughout any of your lesson plans that you're going to be creating, if you're going to be a teacher, that you include strategies so that they can learn to become independent learners. And that's all for this chapter. I do thank you. If you have any questions or problems, please let me know. You can get a hold of me via email. You can get a hold of me via Skype. Have a nice day now. Bye-bye.